think we are live now. Cool. Hey everyone, I'm Sam. This is Jared. And yeah, we are here to talk about Take Two. I just want to start by saying thank you to Gail for the invite. It means a lot to us. We met her like not too long ago, like for our show last week with Enduzo Makatini at Public Records. And in short, we operate a DIY event series that we'll talk a lot more about in the next 30 minutes. And yeah, like a lot of folks operating outside of traditional venues, like there is really no blueprint for what we do. So it's awesome to see folks like Gail providing a space for us to collectively share information and potentially grow. So yeah, thanks again, Gail, for that. We thought this would be an interview, so we didn't prepare too much for it. We just learned this morning that it was a talk. So we scrambled today to find a few themes and topics that we think would be interesting for this audience. We'll try to do it like self-interview like style. So yeah, bear with us if it's wonky. Yeah, if anyone is watching live and have any question, please ask. We're more than happy to take them. But yeah, I guess let's get started with intro. Jared, do you want to tell us a bit more about like who you are?
Sure, yeah. So I'm Jared Proudfoot. I've been in New York for around 10 years now. I'm originally from Sydney, Australia. And during the day, I work for a nonprofit called the Resolution Project, where I manage communications there. I've been there for around 5 years. And outside of that, do a lot of music-oriented work, anything from events that we'll talk about today to journalism, to a little bit of DJing, basically anything adjacent to music, where I can just spend time with others that are kind of similarly minded and musically oriented. And that's all from me.
Yeah, and I'm Sam. I'm 31, almost turning 32. I'm originally from Nantes, which is a city in the northwest of France, but I moved to New York around almost 10 years ago, based in Brooklyn, New York. For a living, like by day, I'm a software engineer, and for fun or outside of work, I'm like Jared. We're focusing on a lot of different music-related things that we'll discuss more in details. It was a prompt from Gail, and Jared, do you want to let us know how you got into jazz?
Yeah, so I kind of been around music most of my life. I grew up in London. I was in choir there, St. Paul's Cathedral Choir, and so started with kind of classically trained music education, and then moved to Sydney when I was around 11 years old, and had learned a little bit of piano and also trombone as well. And the reason I got into trombone was because I remember someone telling me that it was a pretty versatile instrument that you could play in the orchestras, usually playing the best parts, and then you could also transfer that over to the big bands as well and play a little bit of jazz too. So that really appealed to me, and it was something that I was taking seriously, when I was young. And I would say when I started to go to college, I kind of stopped doing music for a while, and forgot a little bit about kind of my passions and interests there. And it wasn't until I moved to New York and I think started to go a little bit deeper into the music culture here and the history, that I really just kind of fell deep into the jazz world. Mainly attending Smalls Jazz Club. That was where I really fell in love with the music, I think, and just starting to frequent some record stores as well. So Human Head was a big one for me in Brooklyn. That was really where I would say I'd say I've learned the most about music probably in Human Head than anywhere else.
Shout out to them.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll stop there.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, on my end, like my earliest memory of jazz, I think is coming from my mom's like musical taste. She at home, like we listen to a lot of stuff. My dad is from Cameroon, my mom is French, so there was a lot of like Western African music, a lot of West Indian music as well, zouk, and so on. But yeah, on the jazz part, it was really like Serge Gainsbourg that she was listening to a lot. And as a kid, I didn't realize there was, especially his earlier stuff, which was really like chanson, but also early jazz. And it's funny because one record that I go back quite often, one of my favorites from him is Percussions, which is I was venturing into the Afro-Cuban jazz, and there's a song on it that is called New York that it sings in French. So it's like mixing the French and New York connection there. But yeah, like out of this, like when really I focused on it was mainly through hip hop. I grew up like as a big hip hop head, like listening a lot of it, a lot of influence from the US. And at some point you realize, like for example, the Pete Rock and CL Smooth like searching, and then there was a radio. There is still a radio in France that play a lot of music, and it's called Radio Nova. And I remember hearing like the version searching of Roy Ayers, and I was just like, oh wait, I thought that was a Pete Rock song. And then you just go down the deep end of like, you realize like Roy Ayers like created the Project Ramp, who wrote a song that was also sampled by a Tribe Called Quest on Bunny That Apple album. And then you start looking into the breaks that were used on that record, and it's just endless. So yeah, it opened me up to like a lot of different music genres, including jazz. But when I really started like focusing on it and going to shows was, I think, when I met Jared back in 2017, 2016. I forget.
2018?
I don't know. I forget. And yeah, it was like the DJing at the time, and we were DJing also at the same spot as what we call like upstairs DJ, so more of the bar area of Black Flamingo. We used to be a restaurant and a club, a little club as well in the basement. And one night they decided to do a special like where they promoted us or upgraded us from playing upstairs to like downstairs in the club. Big moment for us, yeah. So yeah, that's how we met. Like we realized we're playing the same stuff. I realized he had started like Picnic Recordings, a label that had both records and yeah, we just bonded over music. Talking about Picnic,
Bryce.
Yeah, shout out to Bryce. Yeah, exactly.
And also to Vinny and Jared, who we also met that night and who remain like longtime friends as well.
True. From that little club night turned to longtime friendships. It's awesome. Yeah, talking about Picnic Recordings, do you want to tell a bit more about what it is, how you started it?
Yeah,
before I joined.
Yeah, the label is started in 2016, so I'm about 6 years old now or so, and really blossomed into a multifaceted organism, I guess. It's more than a label now. We kind of have a radio show on the Lot Radio. We put on events such as Take Two, and basically started after I went on a work trip to Morocco back in 2016 and was exposed to Moroccan music, and specifically Gnawa music, which was like some of the most beautiful, deep and spiritual music I'd heard. And I was only in Marrakesh for I think like 2 days or something. So really just a really kind of shallow introduction to the music. I think I got back on a Sunday night to New York. On the Monday, went back to work and was doing a little bit of research to see what music was happening that week in New York. And actually that night, in of Gnawa were playing a show at Brooklyn Bowl. So called up my friend Jack, who I went to high school with, and we went and watched a show they were opening for another band, and there was probably about 20 people in that room, massive room. Yeah, they came out, started playing, and Jack was like, "Oh, I know one of the guys on stage, which is David Lismy, who's the bass player, and played with Jack for a bit, and also is obviously in Ngahane too." So we had an in, and we just decided that night that we'd love to hear that music on vinyl. We'd both been collecting a lot of records at that point. So that was kind of the start. We have our 7th release coming up in about 2 weeks. So not the quickest moving label, but still ticking over. And yeah, we try to release music by kind of local New York artists, and try to go to as many shows as we can, and support in whichever way we can. And if there's a way for us to put out a record, and just to help with some promo and marketing and getting the word out about artists we love, that's really kind of what the label is about. And Sam, you joined in, was it 2018, 2019?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and really kind of pushed us forward, added some rocket fuel to the mix. Yeah, here we are today.
Yeah, awesome. Also, something that we've been doing in addition to the Picnic label is a show on the Lot Radio, which is a internet radio first, but also they have a little shipping container. They operate out of this little triangle at the border of Greenpoint and Williamsburg, and showcases a lot of talent from New York and all the boroughs. So yeah, we have a show there every month called Picnic AM, where we play a lot of things from all over the world. Try to have always a bit of a focus on the New York music scene and what's happening, whether that's from jazz to house, ambient, gnawa, pretty much anything. Yeah, and I guess in parallel to the label work, we have also started this event series called Take Two. Do you want to tell us how it came to be, and we can do a back forward? Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. So back in 2018, there was a lot of different things happening in New York. The first one was there was I don't know if it's a resurgence. I don't know if it's a word, but there was a lot happening around the active or deep listening like field or on topic. And instead, the TLDR of active listening is, well, passive listening is when the music is in the background, it is skipped, you don't engage with it fully, and with like getting away from the format of a vinyl, the format of an album, and more like people releasing singles more than full-blown projects. It's also easy to like skip a song when you listen to it on any platforms. A few folks have tried to center the listening on the music and control the environment in which the listening is happening. A few places that were doing that, or events that were doing that at the time, was a planetarium that was organized by, and is still organized by, the folks that are now behind Nowadays and Mr. Saturday Night, the label, and organizing the Mr. Sunday events. And planetarium, the concept is you're in a loft with a wonderful audiophile sound system, and everyone is not talking, just chilling. Some people are on the floor just lying down, and they play just the most beautiful music, and you fully engage with it because you're doing nothing else but listening. A different event organized by Colleen Murphy, that's more of an international one, but they have a satellite in New York, is Classic Album Sundays. And this is what it is. Like every month they feature a classic album that is across all genres, from a Kate Bush record all the way to J Dilla Donuts, for example, or Miles Davis Beaches Brew. Then they have a bit of an intro that gives the context on the record, and then they play the record from the beginning to the end on an audiophile sound system. Everyone is tapped in to the listening. So we are attending these events, being like heavily inspired from it. And then we saw that something was happening in London in this audiophile bar and restaurant called Brilliant Corners, where they have an event called Play Twice. And they wanted to recreate the experiences that they were having in their apartment with friends, where they would listen to a record from the beginning to the end. But they didn't want to stop there. They wanted to have also a band doing their interpretation. And so we reached out to them. We thought that was maybe cool to bring that to New York. Collaboration didn't happen, but we moved forward with our event called Take Two. I had the chance, or I still have the chance, to live in Bushwick, where you have a lot of lofts, and so large spaces that are pretty much empty, and also very, how to say, welcoming and forgiving neighbors, where you can like throw parties and events with people attending and not complaining and not calling the cops on you. So we started with this idea, and this is the blueprint of Take Two. It's two elements. First is an interrupted high-quality playback of a seminal album, usually jazz-related, and then it's followed by a modern-day reinterpretation by New York City, usually, and we can talk about more later, New York City musicians. We don't tell the musicians what album they should pick. We basically pick a band leader, and they have the freedom to pick whatever album they feel like, as long as it's really under an hour. They can put together the band that they want and reinterpret it in the format that they feel is the more suited for the event. It started pretty small with 20 friends in my loft, with singer-songwriter and acoustic guitarist Matt White. And the album that he picked is this 64 bossa nova classic that you probably have heard about. This is Gilberto. On that album, there is this very famous, maybe the most famous bossa nova song, like "The Girl from Ipanema," that is sung by Astrid Gilberto. And yeah, we did that with 20 friends, just one artist, one guitarist, and see how it happened. We had plenty of questions like, can people sit still and do nothing but listen to an album for 35, 45 minutes? Will their interpretation be interesting enough so that the audience is okay with listening to the same thing twice? And yeah, we were like super surprised, like seeing an audience reacting in different ways to the music. Some people like almost fell asleep. Others were just, closing their eyes and just bopping their heads. Some people were doodling or live drawing as they were listening to the record, inspired by the music. And the connection of the audience also with the album in ways that we couldn't have imagined. I remember like someone came after the album was played saying that it was, an album that her mom was playing a lot when she was a kid. She now passed away. And she teared up because it reminded her of all these like great memories that she had with this music. And so it's really touching for us to see what impact this format has had on an audience, and also on the musician side. So we started there. Then I don't know, Jared, do you want to go over like what came next, what came after? Maybe go through a few events and what albums have been covered, and maybe a few highlights that you can think of.
Yeah, so we featured everything from Miles Davis, In a Silent Way, to Fela Kuti, Teacher Don't Teach Me Nonsense, to Albert Ayler, Spiritual Unity, Roy Hargrove, Ear Food, Sun Ra, Space is the Place. It's been really fun to learn about the music that is like inspiring current day musicians. That we look up to on the scene today, and also just trying to make that connection between record culture, from which we've learned so much about music, to live music culture as well, and making the connection between these albums that were recorded 50, 60 years ago, and how they're still having such an impact on young players that are like coming through today. I think is like just some of the most interesting parts for me. Yeah, I mean, the whole experience culminated in our most recent event at Public Records, which was the first time we've kind of taken it to a legit venue. And prior to Public Records, we've been hosting this event in Sam's loft, as he said. We met Kyle through one of the events, and Kyle has a loft space in Greenpoint that we've been hosting some events. We have friends that had a house in Bed-Stuy, and we hosted an event in their garden. We also have friends that have a barn upstate, and we've hosted the event there.
Shout out to Nat and Zara from River Hill Art Residency.
That's right. So I think the roving nature of the event is also super interesting, and definitely seen a big uptick in audience members when we do move the event to a different spot. I think people really enjoy new spaces and meeting new people, and just hearing music in different venues. I think that's really been a strength for this event series.
Yeah.
I also think we featured Don Cherry's Brown Rice, and when we're doing a little bit of research for Take Two, we usually present some like live liner notes at the top of the event where we introduce the record and introduce the artist. And in doing a little bit of research for Brown Rice and just about Don Cherry and his wife Moki Cherry, got into a little bit about their philosophy for life, which is about kind of the art of improvisation, and also so for instance, how are you thinking about improvisation in your everyday life, and also about a specific quote that Moki said, which was the stage is home and the home is a stage, and I think that really resonated with us because it was something that we had been definitely inspired by from like the New York downtown loft scene, and we had been trying to do in Sam's apartment. And I think just by having that kind of welcoming, comforting environment for people, slightly different to what maybe they were used to at some of the clubs, I think it's really been a nice spot for us to welcome in some people that maybe were just kind of new to jazz and to some of the records that we were playing, and they would just enjoy the fact that they can come and spend a Sunday evening in a nice apartment with some plants around, probably those plants you're sitting in front of, and yeah, just kind of seeing familiar faces and removing that divide between the artist and the audience.
Yeah, and the big like what makes Take Two special is definitely the audience as well. Like, you know, across all ages, social backgrounds, ethnicities, and you, as you said, you have like hardcore jazz aficionados or like people that know that record from the beginning to the end. You know, they know every note of it and they played it to the fullest, or total strangers to the music that are just coming for a cool event. Yeah, and it's been awesome to like see regulars coming, but also new people that have been slowly, you know, word of mouth type of thing, where they learned about the event and wanted to check it out for themselves and end up having an amazing time and become regulars themselves. It's awesome. When I'm curious, like when you hear about, because this is about alternative venues for jazz, and obviously we operate in that space, like as you said before public records last week, it's always being DIY and in DIY venues, and we've been doing a lot of things ourselves, if not everything. And so I'm curious, like when you hear about like, alternative venues for jazz, like what comes to mind? What spots?
For me, I was probably most heavily inspired by a place in Sydney when I was going to university there called 505, and it was in these artist lofts called Hibernian House, and it was my sister-in-law was throwing some folk shows there, but also that the 505 was more jazz based. So that for me was very eye-opening. Where I could just go to, and like an introduction into like DIY and loft gigs, and the fact that I could just like bring a 6-pack of beer into a space and not pay, you know, like $50 to get in, and not pay $50, you know, to buy food or drink or something, and just go on like a Tuesday night and see, you know, top class musicians, I think was really eye opening. And obviously there's a lot more of that happening in New York than Sydney. So that to me, I think is just something that's really special. I think other places I think of are like churches. Like I know the Lot Radio has done a fair few shows in the church across the street from them. Obviously there's Ambient Church that has shows. I love that. I just love going to any venue that isn't a traditional venue and seeing shows. I think it's just you hear the music differently, you experience it differently, and you're also able to check out a beautiful building that you otherwise maybe wouldn't have ever gone in.
Yeah.
So yeah,
exclusive access to something.
Right.
Yeah, and you took it you took this question from the point of view of the attendee, and I think it's also interesting maybe for this forum to talk about what about operating an event like in this alternative like jazz venues, and what can be the pros and cons. One, we're not operating a venue per se, because like every time we do a show, like it's not always a different one, but we've done this event series, like we're about to do our 17th one for the past like 4 years, so we've done quite a few spaces. And I think one of the pros I can think of is having full control of the environment. You have blank slate, you can do pretty much anything you want to make it feel like home. Whereas like a traditional venue, well, they have a branding. It might be like also a restaurant where people have to sit at a table, and there is specific music that they want to put before, and there is like you need room for like the server, the waiters to go around, and all that. Where like you can create the setting that you want for the event that you want, and I think that's awesome, especially when we think about this, like the ecosystem of sound, like the relationship between the audience, the music, and the sound system, which is always something that we are trying to figure out. And when like you have the balance of the three, when it's well balanced, is when an event is successful. And also pro that I can see is more selfish, like having world-class musicians that you would usually see at massive festivals playing a feet away from you in your living room is wild to me, and I'm super grateful each time that we can make it happen. Would you like to talk about more the challenges or the cons of operating Take Two?
Yeah, I mean, finding your own backline and transporting that to the venue.
Yeah.
Generally, like a lot more work. Obviously, you have to be pretty passionate about what you're doing. Yeah, there's certainly some limited financial resources, and yeah, I think just a little harder to be consistent with what you're presenting. Obviously moving to different venues definitely has its pros. It's interesting for the audience, for the artists, and for us. But it's also a little harder to provide a consistently quality experience for the audience. It's a challenge. And then there's also the legality of it also. Are we allowed to be presenting music in this space? Who needs to be informed of what we're doing? And then how can you keep ticket prices low while also kind of fairly paying the artist and hoping that the audience trusts what you're doing and will kind of follow you to a random loft space in a neighborhood that they might not have gone to before.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, overall, I mean, we've definitely seen more pros and cons. Hence the fact that we're still doing it today and we're still loving it. So, I think something that we'll continue to seek out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and talking about the challenge of consistency and wanting to keep the I don't know, the core of what we do. Like, we asked ourselves a lot of questions when we brought Take Two for the first time to public web venue, which was Public Records, which worked perfectly for what we wanted to try. But how do you transfer something that you've created in a loft with 20 people to a full-blown club with 200 more people? And how do you keep this like deep focus and active listening part? How do you ensure that the musicians are cared for in the same way that they're cared for at your home? And I'm glad we succeeded. We had a lot of concerns, but it worked out. One element that helped us being successful is also we said that you are doing a lot yourself, and that's true, but we also have an amazing crew of friends that have been with us from the start and that just believed in the project, and they don't ask for any money, they just ask for good vibes, which is surreal to us. And I think one of the prompts from Gail was if there was like any advice or lesson that we've learned and that we would like to share with musicians and promoters, like people evolving and doing things in alternative spaces, is surrounding yourself with people that you can trust, and more importantly that are as passionate as you are. and knowing that you can rely on those folks is amazing. Like we wouldn't be able to do that without our friends. So there are too many to give them shout outs to, but you know who you are. So yeah, thank you. I'm seeing the little banner, which means like we are almost at the end. Do you want to walk us through like what's next for us and do a bit of promo of self promo?
Yeah, so this Sunday, Juneteenth, we have our next Take Two. It's with Gifton Gellin. We will be featuring Miles Davis's Fila de Kilimanjaro. Still a handful of tickets remaining there, so definitely check out our website if you'd like to join from that. It'll be in Greenpoint in Brooklyn. We're heading over to Paris in July, so for anyone there, we'll be working with the band Underground Canopy. The event is on July 3rd. Be featuring Cortex. Forgive the pronounce. Maybe you should pronounce the record, Sam.
Troupeau Bleu with strong R.
And yeah, we have an event upstate as well, back in the barn with Nat and Zara, which we're really looking forward to. On the label side, we have a release coming out on June 1st with vibraphone player Will Shaw, featuring a remix by our friend Tom Blip. Will is actually someone who we worked with on a Take Two, and just has been really awesome to continue the conversation with him and to release some of his music. So that's on the horizon for us too. I think that's everything. Thank you very much to Gail again for having us. It was really awesome to work with Gail for our most recent event at Public Records with Nduzo. And love this group and everything that it stands for. It's right up our alley. So thank you very much.
Thanks. See you, folks.